Okay, I think we're live. Let me know if you can hear me and see my screen. It's been a while since I've done the live stuff, Duck. You know, you're the hard worker in the Technical Roundup duo. You do the full 1 hour live stream when the market doesn't move for a whole week, whereas I do my quick 15-minute, hello guys, I haven't taken a trade yet, see you next week, you know. Yeah, are we okay? Kind of
Yeah,
audio? Okay,
yeah,
sweet.
on both fronts, we're good.
Awesome. We're doing a live casual Friday. Well, thank you for joining us if you are, and if you're watching the replay, thank you for doing that as well. As always, do subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. Sounds repetitive, but it's free and helps us a lot to grow, for us to reach new audiences, all that usual stuff. And also, thank you to FTX for supporting the app. All your mobile trading needs and portfolio tracking stuff can be done in one place. Links available in the description below. So, Don, for the first time in a while, you posted a useful thread, and that thread was about you getting a girlfriend.
Oh shit!
Uh,
I knew this was coming.
and it started with, I mean, it's your fault, right? Like you put it
It
out there,
is. It is.
and
Yes.
you chronicled it from I think the first date to
Yeah.
basically it's like a market cycle except in reverse because girlfriend is the capitulation stage, right?
It
Um,
is.
or denial. I don't know. It's
I mean,
something.
usually it's top, right?
Yes, yes, for sure.
But yeah, for
Uh,
me, I reversed it.
So, I mean, I'm just wondering, because I don't care about your personal life. You have a girlfriend, whatever, you're probably not going to grow old and die together, so fine. But I'm
hmm
interested in the market signals that might generate. So, is it bearish that you found someone to, like, be your pity girlfriend, knowing what you do as a job? Is it like a good long volatility signal that, you know, if the market's been so quiet that you've had enough time to develop your personal life, that it has to pick up if it's reached that level of extreme? I mean, what useful information can we infer from this girlfriend scenario?
I mean, the only thing that I think that could be like useful signal out of like all the noise is that like I met her mother, and when I told her like what I do, that I work like in crypto, she was like, "But I've heard it's supposed to go down sharply, like really
Oh,
big
nice.
time." That's the only actionable advice that I have, I think, out of all of it.
So you're using your girlfriend introduction to girlfriend's family as sentiment. I mean, fair enough. It's quite easy. They both work at the same strip joint, right? So it's kind of a
Oh,
get
come
a
on,
two for
dude.
one.
Oof. Oof.
So I see. What did you respond to that? Just out of interest.
I just told her that it doesn't really matter to me whether the price goes up or down, which is not necessarily true right now,
I was
but
gonna say, like, come on.
but I mean, I'm not gonna argue with someone that said that the crypto markets are gonna go down. I'm just gonna say
Sure.
it doesn't really affect me too much. But yeah, I don't really think it's any signal, given that she doesn't really care.
Right. And it's your girlfriend's mum as well. Can you imagine first time meeting her? I was like, well, actually, it's the future of finance, and this is what you don't know about Web3, and this is what Satoshi changed. You know, that
Oh
would be a
God, yeah, that'd
yeah,
be
fantastic intro.
yeah. I'd hate to have that done to me, so I would never do it to anyone else.
Yeah, when I was hanging out with my friend in Florida, he went back. You know, we came back recently, and he went to speak to his dad, and his dad was just like, oh, you know, asking him for some reason, being like, crypto's such a scam, and it only, you know, it's kind of down only, it's fraud, etc. And I'm there, and he was like, my friend was like, oh, I wish you were there to argue with him. And I was like, no, I'd agree with him. Like, and we probably agree over this. Like, is there insider trading, information asymmetry, you know, light forms of market manipulation, retail gets rinsed, like high volatility, which means most people get blown out, like poorly explained financial instruments that are easily accessible despite being complex. I don't know, man. I think people think if you're in crypto that you evangelize the space in its current form, and that couldn't be
Mhm.
more true in my experience. So
It
that's
couldn't
kind
be
of
further from the truth, right?
right. Right. If
Yeah.
you're being honest, at least, I think, like intellectually honest. Some people feel the need to cope and present a version of crypto that even they don't believe in to make their job, life, choices seem more justifiable. But I think the best operators in the space can be cynical when they need to be and sort of abandon that cynicism when they need to as well.
Yeah,
Um,
100% agree.
yeah. And as
I
far
don't I
as
don't really trust anyone that just kind of like goes and tries to evangelize people, like
yeah.
tries to kind of pull them in. At that point, it starts looking like a cult more than
So you're
anything.
not a Michael Saylor fan, are you?
No.
Yeah, that part wasn't ambiguous.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
see, for you, you're fortunate in that you've got this, organic, wholesome, progressing personal relationship. I can't relate to that. For me to get any type of female contact, I have to pay for it, and it's not in the dodgy way that you think. I haven't capitulated that far yet. So I signed up to this to a massage a couple of days ago, right? Like a proper one, not a dodgy Asian parlor where it's like Thai £10, Swedish £15, special XX full body £100. It's like I wonder why that one's so expensive. It wasn't one of those places. It was like a legit place with like 20 minutes from my place.
I would say the same thing. Yeah.
I would, yeah, I have to give that precursor, right? Yeah, and it's like 20 minutes in, she flipped me like a pancake. No, that's not what happened. But basically, I walk in there and I signed up for this like hot stone, whatever massage thing. And I get in there, and they tell you like the procedure or whatever. And I'm there, and this lady takes out these two candles and shoves up my ass. No, that's not what happened. She takes out these two candles and she's like, "Can you tell me which one smells better?" Right? And I smell the two candles, and they smell exactly the fucking same, right? Like, I'm sure they were even the same candles. And I'm like, this one, I guess? And she was like, oh, well, that means you're dehydrated. And I'm like, I mean, I didn't say anything.
Okay,
but in my mind,
okay.
I'm like, stop lying. Like, it doesn't mean that. I just got here, Like, what the fuck are you actually talking about? And, for me especially, this woo-woo voodoo stuff, like, doesn't resonate whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure the massage is supposed to be relaxing, but I just started off completely agitated, which is funny. And that, I just had to make a relatable personal life, personal touch story to your girlfriend one, and the best one I can come up with is that. So there we go. Do you want to talk about markets by any chance? Any point?
I mean, at some point we can. Yeah.
At some point.
I like where this is going.
No, that's where the story ends, unfortunately. If there's any further progress, I'll let you know. I've signed up for 20 massages for the next month. Yeah, okay. So we've got BTC.
She's gonna pull out like a different candle set each time, and then
Yes.
make something else up. I mean, it's a good way to go. I like it.
I mean, well, someone's got to pull out, right? Okay. So we should talk about BTC USD before this completely derails. So
Yes,
first things first, the more we spend at 20K, the more I become convinced of two things. One is like purely structurally, it doesn't look like a mega macro all-time bottom. But I also think it reminds me of like some early, maybe the first time round summer version last year of 30K, where you just have a level and there's so much garbage, FUD, and nonsense and aggression that comes into it, but it doesn't budge. And eventually, when you get fucking bored of the level, you get some sort of meaningful bounce, right? And the bounce doesn't need to be massive, doesn't need to be trend reversing, doesn't need to be like special in terms of where it is in the cycle. But it's just a case of, you throw the kitchen sink at a level, and if it doesn't break, then you get something out of it, even if it's not the move that you might want or expect. I mean, we can talk about candle closes and stuff, but honestly, nothing's changed, right? It's like the weekly time frame, bad stuff keeps happening, price goes down a bit, then goes up a bit, a lot of S&P correlation, but it's still at 20K. I will note, just for consistency, it's still below the 200-week moving average, but I think a retest of that looks like plausible or reasonable. And that's roughly at the top of the current range at 22.6, etc. I wanted to get your view on the daily time frame, because you and I wrote about and spoke about the kind of daily cluster from 21st of June, 22nd of June, that like red candle structure.
Yes.
And that got chopped to bits, or at least it kind of looks like it's getting chopped to bits. So I argued on Monday that if that cluster didn't lead to a higher low, that the range itself looked vulnerable, like all those higher lows in the interim kind of looked a bit dodgy, and the market kind of went neither here nor there. It did trade to that bottom of the range, the closer bottom to the 2nd of July, and it's been bouncing since then. So I want to get your take on the kind of, do you care about that cluster where it is now? Do you think it could be like bad support, bad resistance? Like, is it still a good level? And I guess the second one is, do you agree? I mean, how do you think this range is going to resolve up, presumably?
Yeah.
So, or at least at the very least, the top of the a test of the top of the range at like 22.6, 23K,
No, I
whatever.
think it's generally gonna go up. Like I mean, that's my fault, right? But it doesn't have to, obviously. But I think I don't even think okay, it has to go to the range high. I think it's probably going to resolve to the upside.
Yeah.
With regards to the level, I think the problem with the level is that we have such good support at 20K that if the level fails, right, the cluster that we talked about, you're still just going to run into like the best support level that you have on the chart. One of the best ones we've ever had in Bitcoin history, in my opinion, just based on how we've gotten here. Basically, like capitulation of like the biggest funds, capitulation of the biggest lenders, capitulation of pretty much everyone, besides maybe retail. I mean, retail probably capitulated as well. But it's like, it's a very different capitulation this time, right? It's the first time that we've seen, at least since 2017, this form of capitulation into a level. And then it's like prior all-time high. So it's kind of like, I think the fact that we have that level so close by, it makes trading the daily level really tough because, it's bound to get chopped while the market is kind of testing the best level on the chart. It's just kind of how it goes
It
usually.
ends up being noise, right? Like you've got a very clear
Yeah.
high time frame level, and that's going to generate most of your signals. And the quote unquote resistances and other structures nearby end up kind of getting washed on lower time frames, right? I
Yeah.
think you said so on your stream as well, essentially, that if for a higher time frame weekly thing, the chart's been really consistent, but from a lower time frame point of view, given like headline risk and everything else, it's been a bit more of a nightmare.
Yeah, I think in general, around like high time frame levels, you get a lot of low time frame chop, and people wonder why. And I think the reason is just that you're gonna have big interest in like buying the support level or selling the resistance level. Um, so it's just kind of like, it just goes like that. It just takes like these high time frames take like when, if it's a weekly candle, sometimes you have to spend like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks at that level. And if that's a prerequisite, you kind of have to chop, right? Because otherwise you couldn't. Like there's going to be
Yes.
structure built around that high time frame level on the lower time frames, and that has to be chopped. Otherwise, price would just move away from the level, and usually it stays for a while. And I think that's kind of what we're going
Yeah, I
through.
think people forget that like high, it sort of levels scale with time to some extent. Where higher time frame levels, you need to give them more candles to play out, and lower
Yeah.
time frame levels, they need less time to play out, generally speaking. And that's at least one of the reasons is the type of participants who are trading those levels. You know, the intraday stuff, it's going to be very like usually smaller positions in and out with quicker resolution. Whereas if you're someone with a ton of capital doing business at like really high time frame levels, it takes a while to accumulate those positions, right?
Yeah.
And as a result, price stays glued to those areas for longer. So a lot of the time, if you, I don't know, people have issues when they jump time frames. So like scalpers suddenly trying to trade higher time frame levels a lot of the time, they'll expect the same resolution they normally get from lower time frame levels, and therefore end up getting really dodgy management signals. Whereas if you just waited, pretty much, it would generate clear signals. I know it's actually unpopular nowadays, but that's sort of why candle closes work, because they carry that. It's not because it's like the most simple thing and everyone's looking at it. I'm sure that plays a part, but the reason as an entry mechanism or just as a signal generating mechanism to kind of get an idea of whether a level is holding or not, like the reason it works is because you simply can look at the closes at the level on the time frame on which the level is based, and that tends to be fairly unambiguous as to whether it's holding or not, right?
Yeah.
I think
Exactly.
candlesticks are just one way to come to consensus as far as possible as to whether a level is holding or whether it's broken. And if you treat it and manage it and assess it on the same time frame that the level itself comes from, you kind of remove a lot of noise that way. I guess that's a long version of saying don't be that guy who's trying to trade the weekly level, and if it like closes a 5 minute below it, just say, okay, never mind, the weekly level's cooked, on to the
Yeah.
next one.
I've actually seen a lot of that, which is really weird to
Yes,
me.
yes.
And a lot of people have, and this is always kind of funny when every time I comment about it, like price moves against me. But like a lot of people have kind of commented about my trades. And every time it goes low or like goes into weekly support, they're like, haha, you're an idiot. And every time it bounces like a little bit, they're like, oh, you're like so smart. Nothing's changed, right? Like my trade, if I'm buying Bitcoin at 20K, it goes to 19K. There's zero difference for me there. If it goes to 21K, I mean, I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, I've made a little bit of profit. But I mean, I'm not going to close the trade, right?
Yeah.
And nothing's really
It's
changed.
not a
So,
management signal by any
yeah.
means.
So
That size deviation doesn't mean shit, right?
yeah, exactly. Because like my target is so much further away and my kind of invalidation is so much further away. So, like, this kind of price action is just noise to me, mostly.
I
I mean,
mean, you said it
obviously,
doesn't change anything, but
yeah.
when it dipped to 19 something, you got that DM of a guy saying he like lost all his money following your call. So
Yep.
clearly a lot changes in this daily range. But that's all
Yep.
it's been, right? It's like in a weekly area, I think it's currently being capped by this extremity of the range towards the highs with the 200 week moving average at like 22.6, and it's being capped to the downside as far as the 20k big round number support goes. People looking to sell mean reversion on a shorter time frame do so in the low to mid 20s. People looking to buy value in terms of where the market is relative to high time frame levels do so closer and ideally below 20k. And it's just ping pong between those participants until one of them folds, right? That I think that's sort of some context as the price action we're seeing now. I think getting to the top of the range and the reaction there is going to be very telling, because it would be a meaningful mean reversion, and it would also be like a proper test of the 200 week moving average. Like if you look at the daily time frame right now, the last swing high sort of barely wicked into it, but I don't. That's not like the best or most decisive test in the world. I kind of want to see it get to the top of the range just to kind of see what happens. Like even from a reaction point of view, like if it just closes above and no one's willing to sell that thing, at the very least for me that will become a valid trigger simply by a product of lower time frame range breakout at higher time frame support. Right? It doesn't need to be much more complicated than that. And I think the benefit of trading, or at least paying attention to breakout signals at that juncture, is not only the higher time frame context as mentioned, but also your invalidation is really, really clear. That anything that looks like a failed breakout through there is completely cooked, or at the very least is a pretty ugly signal and gives you a clear invalidation, right? So you're at a high time frame level. You have a very clear range boundary to generate signals, and you have a very clear view of what invalidation would look like. Because God knows in this trend we've had enough failed breakout signals, right? So I think there's plenty of good stuff to be derived from the range high. And I think pretty much the same set could be said for support, right? Like if you take the bottom of this daily range at whatever it is, 19k or thereabouts, and the market pokes below it again, but you get like a more meaningful failed breakdown structure, well then you're in business, right? Because you have a shift in positioning within the consolidation, all within the context of a higher time frame level. Like whatever happens in this range basically is very important, because it's not just an arbitrary daily range; it's a daily range at one of the most important higher time frame levels.
Yeah, I agree. It's gonna be really cool to kind of see where this goes. Like if it breaks down, and it's like a really shitty signal. You can actually even if you want to go like for a pattern kind of thing, it's really interesting how this is shaping up. If you just draw like a trend line through like the closes that we've had to like through those like three closes, you have like an ascending triangle kind of thing going on. Yeah, and then it's capped by the range high, right? And it's kind of just moving slowly towards like the apex of that triangle. So there's definitely, I think, pressure building one way or the other. The longer this kind of goes, the bigger the move is going to be, the one that follows through. Because the thing is, like, if this just like moved right now, I could see it do like a big daily candle or two or three, and then just go sideways and kind of like just fizzle out both ways. But the longer this kind of goes sideways, the more I would trust the breakout either way. So I think it's going to break to the upside, but obviously if it goes sideways from here and then starts breaking down after like a month or two, that would make me cautious until it's kind of reclaimed, because that's like the easiest trade at that point.
It's
right?
like that old saying goes, "Don't fade the break until the break fails." I think that's pretty decent advice, not financial advice, obviously, but a decent slogan to consider within the context of this consolidation. But I'm sure we've beat this horse to death, and not much has changed yet. Probably in the next week or so, I think we'll get some more meaningful structural changes. At least I hope so. I think another range high pissy rejection and a float back down, like it wouldn't necessarily change anything. It'd just be boring, it'd be boring. And I guess
I think there's a good chance it actually breaks out, honestly, in the next 5, 6, 7 days.
Yeah, I'd like to think so as well. Especially with the main volatility sort of headline risk seemingly gone, which was the inflation print. Maybe there's some more appetite for risk taking now that that's in the clear and the S&P hasn't completely died.
And the thing is, right, and this is something that I've noticed on a lower time frame. I've seen a bunch of people kind of make fun of it, but what we've had, right, on the entire way down is that crypto, especially like Bitcoin, but like, I mean, all coins just went along with it, underperformed when the S&P was strong or NASDAQ was strong, and kind of like didn't really do good when the S&P was good, was doing good, and they kind of shit the bed entirely when the S&P went down, right? And I think at least from like what I'm seeing, that has changed to it's doing better than the S&P when it goes up, and it's doing better when it's going down, which is for now it's just like a short-term change, but that's a good development, and that makes me think that the forced sellers that we've had in the market are kind of gone now. Like most of that was absorbed. I think like a bunch of selling happened. A bunch of people had to sell basically, and now it's more like that. It's more we still rely on the S&P going up to go up for now anyway. But we don't have that double negativity anymore, right? So we don't have, okay, we're just weaker. So we're gonna take shit if it goes down even harder than the S&P, and we're not gonna have like any gains. So that's like a really big positive to me. And that opens the door for quite a big mean reversion, I think, just based on the fact that I don't think there's going to be too many people selling into the next S&P move if it is to the upside. If it's to the downside, you're going to see people selling Bitcoin again. But like lately, it's been pretty good actually. I like the reaction I've been seeing in the last few days. Just hope it continues that way.
Yeah, I can really I can really tell. I think with a decently high probability, the next crypto bull market PTSD is going to be a form of Walter Bloomberg / macro / correlation
Yeah.
/ headline type of stuff, where people who essentially got their asses completely handed to them by macro and correlations and all that type of stuff, they take it with them into the next bull market and end up massively underperforming because they're chained to this bear market ghost or specter, you know? And the thing is, every new lot of participants goes through something similar, where the experiences which beat their ass when the market was crappy, they take those scars with them into a much better market and underperform as a result. So, for example, the manifestation of that in our cohort was the whole BitMEX BART type of pattern, right?
Oh
Where
yeah.
if you bought any breakout ever, basically when we learned how to trade in like properly, and at least on the leverage side in 2018 2019, when we were in the trenches, the entire market was mean reverting, and any breakout would like full retrace. As a result, like the idea of a trend didn't even exist, but there was also the underlying premise to treat breakouts with like utmost skepticism and almost have this inbuilt expectation for them to BART back down, fully retrace and mean revert. And obviously if you're in an uptrend, that should be the last thing you expect, right? That's the outlier thing. But because that we took that PTSD with us into the bullish conditions, those new participants who never went through that ended up doing better because they weren't carrying all that moral and emotional luggage, right? And
Yeah.
whatever that ghost of previous market cycles is, every cohort has its own version, and I think there's a decently high likelihood, especially with the impact macro has had, that next time around there's going to be people, you know, writing long doomer threads about inflation or commodities or correlations or something else, and just ignoring that the market's going up. So I think, you know, if you're listening now, that might be worth taking stock of.
Yeah.
Look, for
What
me,
people
go
don't,
on.
sorry.
No, go on.
What people don't really realize is that in crypto, especially, price dictates narrative more so than the other way around, right? If Bitcoin jumps from 20K right now to 25K without the S&P moving, the entire narrative that you're going to see on social media everywhere is going to change from macro to, okay, this is like finally like the inflation hedge is kicking in. They're gonna find something that they can push, and then it's just gonna hop on it, and it's gonna be so obvious to everyone, right? Like, I mean, how could anyone think macro matters in asset like crypto, where it's like it doesn't really like it shouldn't really matter, just based on the fact that that's basically what it made for, right? Like that it's not this kind of inflating thing. And then it's going to change. The entire narrative is going to change overnight. You're going to be sitting there wondering what the fuck happened, right? Um, Obviously, when it goes down, like you don't want to be fading the narrative, especially when it's early. But I think in general, with the narratives, you hop on them early. You kind of follow them, and then you discard them as if it like never happened. Because the thing is, like we've seen so many narratives kind of show up, and then at first people are just kind of like, okay, this is like stupid, and then the more it kind of gets proven that that narrative is going to play out, the more people believe in it, and then they kind of get religious about it, and then it completely reverts on them. And I've seen it so many times in crypto. I've seen so many people lose it all just by stubbornly sticking to like an idea that they don't truly understand and they don't truly know how it works. Which is kind of funny because I think the TA guys, the stupid TA guys that just like put lines on the chart and kind of look at it that way, oftentimes outperform those that kind of try to understand like how everything works, like the macro, try to understand like all the kind of intricacies, because they're looking at it and like, okay, this is like the momentum shifted, now it goes up, and they don't get married to that idea. Obviously, if you're early to kind of narrative and you kind of pick that narrative nicely, it's like that can be career changing. It's happened to me before where I'm like, I just like pick the right narrative, jump on it early enough. But never get married to it. In general, like never get married to anything when you're trading. I think just do your thing, and then discard it the moment it actually shows any sign of like breaking.
Yeah, it's a very weird argument when I've seen made frequently that it doesn't matter, it's all macro. It's like, I don't know what kind of TA you're doing. This has been very one-sided, but still very technically clean downtrend, right? Every level of support that is broken has had follow through. The market slows down and churns at levels that matter. No crazy failed breakdowns or anything like that along the way, just like very systematic, very one-sided, but levels are still levels, and the signals generated by breaks of those levels have still been, and closes above them, if you're talking about support, they've all been pretty decent. Just because you don't like the direction, and that's fair enough. You don't like the direction that it took us, that's fine. But that's a slightly different argument from suggesting that charts are useless or whatever else.
Yeah.
And as we argued at length, like bearish signals started to emerge from 60k, 58k, 60k, and the support levels that were below us, and even where the market's trading now, that's certainly been on. Maybe we didn't expect to get here this quickly, or as a result of everything that happened. You don't have to predict what takes us there if you're doing draw line, make boing type of stuff. But none of these levels are like terribly surprising in and of themselves, right? I think two further things is that, one, just colloquially, dude, I'm definitely gonna buy the top on this thing. It's gonna break out. It's gonna whatever confirm market structure shift reclaim type of thing. I'm gonna buy the top of like a, I don't know, like a 20%, 30% reversion from the lows and just completely eat shit. I can see it right now. So fair warning. If you pay me enough, I'll tell you when I bought. The second thing, and this also speaks to the macro thing you mentioned, like, even if BTC goes to like 30k soon, like, does that mean that there's some sort of macro bottom in? Does that mean the economy is healthy? Does that mean inflation's under control? Like, it doesn't mean any of those things, right? It just mean it mean reverted. So tying very specific price points to the validity of larger, long-standing narratives is a super dangerous exercise, especially in a very kind of reflexive, whatever, momentum-driven, sentiment, news, etc., driven asset class like crypto. Like having having these large narratives be purely invalidated by normal price moves, I think is a really dangerous game to play, because that's how you buy the top on this thing. If you're not following me, you're doing the other thing, which would be that. I think we beat the BTC horse to death.
I think that's actually a very valid point, because the thing is, right, like if you argued with me, if you're sitting here and you argued with me, hey, macro is really shit, and we kind of like, we have a lot of things that are not going well in this world, so I'm gonna like sell options that Bitcoin is not gonna go towards like 60k in the next 2 years, or like in the next year. I'm gonna be like, I mean, dude, be my guest, I don't think it's gonna go to 60k, right? But the thing is, like, it can go to 30. It can even go to 40 without doing anything meaningful, and can just bleed the entire thing back down again. And there's like a big difference there, right? Because if you're like betting on no all-time high because everything's just kind of like shit, I mean, yeah, I can totally get that. If you're betting on, okay, this cannot mean revert because macro is shit, I think you're an idiot. I think that's stupid. Like anything towards 30k, I think is just like not really even a move. Just considering we've come from 70k, we went in a straight line down to 20k. So if you're expecting 20k to 30k, it's being impossible just because like the inflation looks bad, I think this makes no sense. That's a weird invalidation to have anyway, right? And if that 20 to 30k move would change anything for you, and this is why like I bought 20k support, because I don't want to be the guy buying 28k, or like in general like having to deal with those kind of levels, because I don't know what the fuck to do if this breaks to the upside and have no position. Because I mean, where the fuck does it go? No idea. Can it go to 30k? I think so. Could like I'd be probably pretty happy to sell 30k, but it could even, I think, could even go higher without actually changing anything macro wise. And that's the thing, right? Like there's two different discussions going at the same time, where people are just like, it cannot go up because of macro, and okay, it probably shouldn't be going to all-time high in the next like few months. And I think there's very, very different discussions on like a very, very different level.
Yes, I agree with that. The market's going to do what the market wants to do anyway, and we'll find ways to rationalize and cope with it after the fact, right? That's sort of what we do as humans.
Yeah.
On the ETH side of things, up 6%. ETH BTC looks decent as well.
Yes.
It's currently poking. I mean, it literally looks like it's going for the range breakout, like right now on the daily
Looks
time
really
frame.
good. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's above that. I mean, it's above. Yeah, it's currently above the MA, and if you take the top of the range as that kind of first green candle type of thing, a daily close like this could look pretty decent as a higher high after a kind of coiling higher low type structure above two key levels, i.e. the top of the range and the 200-week moving average. I think if anything, this and BTC, they're quite similar, just ETH is leading, so it's there already. I think this is what you look for. Like if it breaks and sticks and is accepted, that's probably the earliest evidence you're going to get for mean reversion,
Yes.
right? And also, and again, that comes with a very nice inbuilt validation or built-in validation that if it doesn't full send and it doesn't like basically teleport within that same week that it breaks, then it doesn't look good. And then if the breakout fails and it closes below basically where it is right now, then you'll know like, oh, so the mean reversion wasn't good towards 2K or all these moving averages. It was only good to give us a range fake out and then keep going where it was going. I think that's why I think breakout trading gets a bad rap for like an undeserved poor reputation for that example, because people always do it wrong. They do it at bad levels and they do it contextually where it doesn't matter, all that type of stuff. They do it counter trend. I understand all of that, but one of the more powerful things about that style of trading is if you have a good eye and a good mind for invalidation, like you find out pretty quickly whether you're wrong, right? Wrong, right? But that's kind of one of the benefits is that if you're breakout trading and you pick your spots basically, your invalidation ends up being pretty clear in most cases, especially in these types of environments where a lot of levels overlap and whatnot. So we'll definitely keep an eye on ETH USD during the course of this stream. Do you have anything to add on the ETH front?
No.
Mean reversion target wise, is it just closer towards 2K presumably you're looking for?
Yeah, I think in general, like you just look at that daily chart, right? And like you said, that kind of breakout is the easiest to trade. I think it's really hard if you don't have a position yet. Like if you bought the lows, it's really easy. You just hold on, and the moment it fails that breakout, you just close it. If you don't have a position, it's a little bit harder, because do you want to buy the range breakout? Like that gets a little bit more tricky, because then you kind of have.
I mean, a bad price is always the price to pay for confirmation.
Yeah,
right. By definition, a lot of the time.
Well said. Yeah, and so you kind of like if you're buying the range breakout, you kind of have to jump back out the moment it closes below, which you would have to do it if you bought the low as well. So for me, it's kind of like it's a really nice spot, because now we can actually see if this has any strength or not. I'm actually like gonna be watching that, and if I see it show weakness after the breakout, I could see myself like sell some ETH that I bought at the lows. I mean, I got like a pretty shitty buy-in at 1.2K, which we're just barely above now. And I got a really, really good buy-in, quite a bit below 1K. And I'm going to just like, if this breakout fails, I'm probably going to like, sell back the ETH that I bought below 1K. And if it sticks, I'm going to be aiming for 2K plus. I think it's kind of funny, because the ETH merge narrative and all of that kind of stuff just went away when price went down, but it's still present, right? It's not like that's been kind of that's off the table. And I think ETH BTC could go up like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50%. And there's a lot of room for ETH USD to move in that case, right? So I'm quite excited about the ETH possibilities. Looks really good to me on the ETH PTC pair, and looks really good on the low time frames on ETH USD. So I'm kind of glad that I'm positioned. Don't really have to do much. Just watch whether ETH USD is actually gonna stick the breakout or not. And if it's not, then I'm gonna have to reconsider. But right now, just pretty confident that like this is a pretty good breakout. And the best situation to put yourself in is one where you actually know what you're gonna do if something happens and what you want to be doing if it doesn't. And in this instance, it's pretty clear cut, I think.
Yeah, being forced to act is always a bad sign for any trade or trade management signal.
Mhm.
I should be offended that any time I just almost say anything, you're like, "Wow, that's actually a good point," as if it's so rare that I ever say anything meaningful or useful that you're completely shocked if I happen to come up with something semi-coherent and intelligible. But it's fine. I'll look past it.
I'm
Let's
sorry.
S&P this thing, right? Because that's still relevant
Yes.
to markets more broadly, and we'll talk about the inflation print and some macro stuff, whatever. LARP a bit about that.
Mhm.
Nothing terribly new, I think, structurally in S&P land. Similar to kind of BTC at 20K, kept retesting that monthly cluster in the low to mid 37s. And I mean, it's finding support there, which is decent.
Mhm.
And then the kind of inflation print day got retraced, and I mean, it moved back into support from the news and bounced from support now. Um, I don't know, like there's not a whole lot going on, so you kind of have to defer to the higher time frames. And at least at the moment, it looks like the higher time frames are at slash above support. Like I
Mhm.
know there's a nearby weekly level that it's clustered below. There's kind of the most recent retest level on the weekly, close to the nearest swing low. Um, and I guess that's where we're playing ping pong, right?
Mhm.
Between monthly support and then this weekly cluster consolidation thing that's been capping it. I think at the very least, as far as arguments for you go, if you were like long crypto and then the S&P looked like it was below support and about to fall off a cliff, that might be uncomfortable, right? But this thing seems to be holding support, so at the very least, that's not against you, or at least it's not a counter signal, right?
And I mean, that weekly support's been tested more than whatever. I mean, you can put whatever you want in there, but like that resistance, sorry, that weekly resistance been tested so many times. Like at that point, like if you're shorting it on the fourth candle, that it's been testing it, it just looks strong, right? It's coming from monthly support, so that changes the context, in my opinion, because otherwise this has been like a pretty clear cut kind of move down where it just retests resistance, like or like it tests support, it bounces, it breaks it, and it tests resistance, like tests that support as resistance. That's been the story all the way down until it hit monthly support. And now I think there's a good chance that that kind of relationship changes. So yeah, I don't know. I look at this chart and I think there's room for it to go up, more so than like I think the chances are higher that it's going to go up than it's going to go down. And at worst, like you said, I think it's neutral. So you can kind of just make your bet based on crypto. And given that crypto, and I mean, I'm just chilling my position over and over and over again, but I mean, I think it just makes sense if you're in a position and you have strong conviction to talk about it. Um, but yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's at 20K, right? A really obvious support level, and you have the S&P looking like this, where it's holding support and it's bouncing from support. And the worst that I could think of is that this chart is like negative, is neutral. Um, I mean, makes me a little bit more confident in buying a support level that I've been looking at for quite a while on Bitcoin.
Yes, fair enough. I think worst case neutral for given monthly supports holdings, like a very conservative and reasonable way to look at it.
Yeah.
But I think TLDR, as far as technicals go for BTC and ETH, it's basically breakout watch. You know, like if it breaks, let it go. If the breakout fails, manage accordingly. Fairly straightforward, I
Yep.
think, overall. Do you want to go over some headliney type of stuff? And obviously, while we're doing that, if you see anything interesting in the chat, feel free to flag it up. Um,
Yeah.
as usual, there's more Celsius news. They declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy in New York, and that's like a whole process. My understanding is that the customers aren't a particularly high class of creditors, like as far as hierarchy goes. Like your secured lenders are top of the list typically. and customers, to my understanding, didn't enjoy that privilege. Surprise, surprise. So, I mean, this is a whole process. The litigation itself, not the litigation, like the legal process itself is like a very expensive one. And it's sort of coming to fruition, everything that was obvious when they paused their withdrawals, right? And I think Celsius also posted their like balance sheet, and that in itself had a huge hole in it. And then that hole grew even larger because of the implied market cap of the Cell token. I mean, isn't it? Wasn't it obvious? Jesus Christ! Uh, but the implied market cap of the Cell token is like vastly overvalued, and yeah, this thing is rough. But the market reacted well to it. But I think at this point it was no surprise, right? I think if you're going to react to this type of stuff, it has to be like sufficiently early, or like even before they pause withdrawals, or like as soon as they pause withdrawals, any of that type of stuff. When there's a sense of novelty and urgency, I think that's where you get your best signals from news if you're going to look for it. This is more just a formalization of what the market had already known, priced in, etc., etc. But it still sucks. Like as you and I discussed, the big moral and reputational issue with crypto and a lot of these exchanges and lenders going under is that they weren't strictly aimed, and even UST to a large extent, they weren't like strictly aimed at speculators, right?
Yeah.
Or like at the very least, there was a lot of crossover in that shared space in the Venn diagram with people who thought they were being risk off and conservative and just kind of custodying their assets for a bit of yield instead of trading them on like leverage or whatever else. So I think that part really sucks that even within the crypto ecosystem, a lot of on a relative basis, risk averse, conservative savers, whatever you want to call them, they just got rinsed by ironically, the gambling incompetence of both the protocols and the lenders and parties with which they stored their funds. And that's really rough.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much exactly it. Yeah. It's kind of, I hate when the kind of like the newer people and the people that don't really know what they're doing get taken advantage of. And sadly,
Yeah.
that's pretty much the crypto story, right? I mean, there's a reason why a lot of us just kind of say, okay, your first cycle, you're going to lose it all. And then the next one, you're going to make a bunch of money, because that's true for most people. If you're not one of the guys that just gets really, really lucky by entering the cycle really early, like I think both of us have done. I mean, for me, I bought Dogecoin and just held it in 2014, and then went full-time crypto in 2017, really early before it actually all like went crazy. But if you're not one of those lucky few, and obviously you're not, most of the people are not going to hear about crypto when it's at all-time lows, right? So there's going to be very, very few new people entering at the bottom. It's going to bottom before new people enter, and then the new people kind of get rinsed pretty much every time. So I hate when that happens, but it just keeps on happening. And I'm really not surprised in this instance that those are the people that are just going to be the ones that just lose a shitload. And the sad part about it, and especially for like in general, like for all of us, is that this is going to have big consequences, I think, in the next few years. Because, yeah, like you said, it hit the savers, and it hit in a big way and in a very public way, right? Because back when altcoins were still small, and when people were investing like smaller sums back in 2017 or even cycles before then, it's just kind of like a bunch of nerds lost a little bit of money, right? The story is very different now, where a bunch of like normal people basically lost a shitload of money, and it's not just like a handful like it was back in the past. It's a lot of people. So I think that's going to have like big consequences that we're not going to like long term. So I think even like for that, the outcry from the crypto community for the heads of these people that just went completely crazy is actually like too little. We should be like just going after pretty much everyone that's kind of practicing like this, but people just tend to forget, I think. And we're probably going to get like in a year, we're going to get the same kind of companies
Oh, for
spring
sure.
back up, and people are going to love it because they can go completely degen with it. And there's
And
a lot
yields
of,
will be back. That's the
yeah,
point, right? Like yields will be back because yield is a product of people wanting to borrow, basically. And when there's a bull market and everyone wants to be long, people want to borrow, yields go up, prices are going up as well. So the greed, I mean, it's kind of almost a reason why you get consecutive market cycles.
Hmm.
Like the cynicism and the pessimism, they go away, and the greed and optimism come back, and you kind of run it back, despite even if structurally nothing's changed. You just have another go, you know.
Hmm.
And there's a certain irony that I appreciate in the premise that, oh, crypto's very volatile and risky, so just park your assets with us and earn yield while we take those assets and do volatile risky speculation in like
It's
DeFi and
absurd.
misplaced
Yeah.
private keys. And they're basically doing on a huge scale what they're telling you not to do because it's too risky in order to provide you with the yield that they promised in the first place. It's a very fantastic cycle. NFT marketplace OpenSea lays off about 20% of its team. I think they said they're aiming for like a 5-year runway at current volumes. So very, very conservative
Hmm.
and like safe on that front. I mean, they're a bit later than quite a few of the other big businesses that you and I spoke about, right? Like, we did a technical roundup a couple months ago when it was like Gemini, Coinbase, and there were hiring freezes and whatever else. Like, I remember distinctly we had one episode where a lot of those were kind of clustered together in the news cycle.
Hmm.
That was at higher prices. And now I think OpenSea has joined the fray as well. And this is very cyclical and very typical with crypto businesses, right? Like they start aggressively overhiring towards the cycle top, and then they're forced to cut and get rid of all the fat at inopportune times because timing isn't really their thing a lot of the time. And as a result, you know, their actions, both with hiring and firing, end up in the grand scheme of things being more or less or rather inopportune. But yeah, I think as generally speaking, as still to the point as far as sentiment goes and the kind of where we are in the cycle as far as retail participation goes, I mean, crypto businesses still aren't hugely optimistic, or at the very least, they've been hit hard and forced to act with this type of stuff. I do think, as a final quick thing, it's worth reiterating the distinction that there is a big difference between the market bottoming and retail coming back to the market, right? Like
Yes.
the market can bottom months and years before retail meaningfully re-enters the market. So the signal doesn't work in such a kind of binary fashion. There's, I think, definitely a time lag between price no longer going down and retail joining the new uptrend as everything is going up. So I think that's a distinction worth bearing in mind as well. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I think it's basically just. I mean, in general, I'm surprised that OpenSea even has to do it because they're making so much money. But I guess I always wonder where these crypto companies spend their money because they make like, especially like OpenSea makes so much. You can just
I mean,
calculate
look,
how
clearly their salaries aren't that good if Nate Chastain had to insider trade the front page of OpenSea for
for
like
like
20
10
ETH or
ETH. Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Maybe it's a salary thing.
But yeah, like I'm always surprised like where the money is going. But in this instance, like we had a bunch of companies do the same thing. I'm not surprised that they're doing it in general. Um, but I totally agree with you that it's pretty shitty timing for a lot of these. I think the only ones that have done hiring decently well is actually FTX. From what I've seen, they've just been kind of going at it slowly.
Binance as well, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Binance in general, like it's pretty opaque what's going on there,
Sure.
from what I'm seeing anyway. So it's pretty hard to judge. But yeah, FTX and Binance probably the only ones that didn't just completely shit the bed. That didn't. I mean, Coinbase surprises me every single cycle with how shit they manage stuff.
Unbelievable. They gave up like a 10-year lead or something.
Yeah,
It's mad.
I mean, they should be. I think they should be Binance basically, and they should be much, much more than Binance, right? Because they had such a lead and they just completely screwed up at every single turn. I'm actually surprised that they're still around with kind of the crow's incompetence that I've seen from them.
Yeah, they might get Poloniex, you know,
Yeah,
or like Bittrex, where you were the native go-to for a long time, but you can't just rely on that status forever, right? You
yeah.
need to do stuff. I think their market share's been shrinking massively as well, and pushing out dodgy products. And the coin listings on that website now, oh my god! Like,
Yeah.
remember the dog paw? I don't know. Kobe had this whole thread about all the garbage they're listing, and these are coins nobody recognizes with tiny market caps that are insider traded allegedly, haha, and no one cares about. So it's just completely shocking. Back in my day, a Coinbase listing, like the rumor of a Coinbase listing, used to be enough to like 10x these things,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Immediately. Nowadays, it's it's a death sentence or just something very depressing, which is a fall from grace, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think like OpenSea, this doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like first cycle NFTs, right? Like
Yeah.
if this is a thing, which it very likely is going to be, even if it's not in the 10k PFP form, you expect it to have another cycle.
Hmm.
Especially if you look at the amount of people NFTs brought into the market as a moat to crypto. It's the most effective moat we've had, bar none. Right? It's not even close. Like DeFi, too technical. No one gives a shit about like circular Ponzi-nomics banking. As far as Bitcoin goes, maybe brought some people in, but now it's just like, how appealing to normies is this whole Austrian economics, censorship resistant, steak dinner, fake stock to flow math stuff. Like, not very, right?
Yes.
Similar to some extent with altcoins, especially as they become more and more technical. But as far as NFTs go, it's like pretty pictures. Your favorite celebrities got one. You can buy them with your credit card. That's how you get the normies in. That's our Trojan horse, if you will, for
Hmm.
getting people to buy our bags.
I,
So I
I
agree with you.
I gotta say, with the NFT side of things, I'm very, very surprised how well they held up, because I was very much a proponent of like the thought that the moment we get the bear market, these things are just gonna go to zero. And then what we got instead, at least like the high value items, obviously like a lot of NFTs went to zero. And I mean, if you bought like the 50th copy of like Bored Ape, I mean, what are you expecting, right? But like the high ticket items actually just basically went down with ETH. So ETH went from 5K to 800, and the NFTs lost like 10% against ETH or something, or 20%. And if you put them on a chart, it's actually, they're just going sideways, most of them, right? The bigger ticket items, which is really surprising to me, which makes me think that there's another cycle um, in the NFT world. It just makes sense to me. That's why I positioned like a little bit. I don't have too much, but I think there's like a good chance that if we get a relief rally, or like in general, like good kind of move in the crypto markets, that NFTs are gonna be again around. And I think they're gonna be around for that, like for the next move, and they're gonna be around for the one afterwards. I think in general they're just gonna stick around, and people can love or hate them. It doesn't really matter to me. It's just like a really good way to trade, something else than just coins. And like you said, it's a really good way to get people on board, as stupid as they are. Like you cannot convince me that any NFT that's out there makes any sense whatsoever right now. Right? I still have like a bunch of NFTs because I think it's a good trade, but like to me they make no sense. But if I see like an opportunity somewhere, I'm just gonna take it, right? It doesn't really make much sense to sit on a high horse and say this is stupid, while it's one of the sectors that has shown the biggest strength of them all, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, the relative strength's been impressive in the higher end collection. Obviously, as you mentioned, that's diluted a bit or a lot by the fact that you had so many of them, man.
Yeah.
So many NFTs, so many rug pulls, so many scams, so many of them at liquid went to zero. Like the sheer magnitude of that side of things is so massive that it almost dwarfs the, I guess, blue chips, if you want to be really generous, that did survive. But the fact that there are some that did is in itself important and some sort of signal.
Hmm.
And also, I just think in general, given their, the cultural impact they had, that's not something to fade as well, like in terms of a moat to the normie world. So I think there's definitely something going on there. And I'm just generally a fan of people being able to get into crypto and interact with crypto and set up a wallet and do whatever else in a non-financialized, non-kind of leveraged speculation form. I think it's positive for us to have something like that in the space, and then if people are interested, they could learn just more about crypto and I guess migrate to other parts of the ecosystem. But as a barrier to entry, taking down the complex financialized wrapper for crypto is, I think, a net positive.
Hmm.
Blockchain venture funding declined roughly 22% in Q2.
Good
I mean,
riddance.
money's tight, man. Money's tight. Raising for these things is more difficult as the cost of debt and in general tighter credit cycles take their toll. I think in general it's one of the best market cycle signals when your favorite, or hopefully least favorite, like completely brainless TA oriented accounts become angel investors and advisors to like a million different projects in the space, doing them on some IDO whatever type of thing. That's just so shitty, and it's so bearish because like a lot of those people have just been in the space for like 4 or 5 years and have never done anything other than line make boing, and have shown no evidence of just being able to think or do anything like that. And then you blink and they're on like 5 advisory boards and partnered with XYZ, and I don't know. Certainly in the recent cycle, it left a sour taste in my mouth. So I think when that comes along, that's kind of signal. I'm also concerned with the trend that we saw towards the end of the kind of venture cycle, which was that nobody cared about secondary market tokens. No one cared about public markets whatsoever. It was all about just funding competitors, or basically towards the end, to be completely frank, funding anything with a seed round that you could get on, because you knew that even if it went down some astronomical amount, you'd be able to get away in profit. Like those types of almost moral hazard level of bad deals, or good for you and bad for everyone else. That's not that. I don't think it's a net positive for the space. And you only need to look at the first iteration of Solana ecosystem coins to
Oh
get a
God,
sense and taste
yes.
of what that feels like. So maybe we learn something and do better as a result. But I'm very cynical and skeptical.
Same here.
I don't think it's going to be any different. It's going to be the same old boys club, very very favorable token deals. Early on in the bull market, it gets absorbed very well, and maybe everyone wins, whatever that means. But always when the tide comes in, like the absurd inequality to some extent of those deals comes to the forefront. And I think even when money gets cheaper and VC activity picks back up, I think it's very naive to assume that it's going to look much different to what we saw towards the end of the cycle, because it's basically free money in many cases. Depending on where you are in the market cycle, sure, whatever else, but a lot of the time, just signing that piece of paper, that SAFT, whatever, is free money for the people investing in it. And retail is just hoping that it takes place at a point in the market cycle when there's enough inflows to prop up those huge holder asymmetries. But I don't like it personally.
No, I hate it as well. I mean, it's kind of because the laws in the US kind of suck, because it could be different, right? It's just so much easier to sell to like these, venture funds, instead of like just normal people. And I think a lot of crypto projects would like to sell to the normal people instead. So you would get like much better deals, but it's just how like it's the world we live in, and there's a good reason for like most of these protection laws that are in place, but it just created like this weird monster in crypto where just VCs running away with everyone's funds. Basically, they buy a bunch of garbage, and then sell it to retail and make a shitload of money on it, and it just always leaves a sour taste in my mouth. But that's one of the biggest ways to make it in crypto nowadays, which I hate. If you can have like the correct friends and the correct kind of like influence, and are willing to go down that route, without giving a shit what it kind of does to people, then you can make a shitload of money, right? It's pretty damn easy. But yeah, it's just kind of how the game is played, and it's probably going to be played like that for the foreseeable future.
100%.
Which is why I think most people would just be better off just staying away from most of these projects where like a bunch of VCs are involved. Problem is, most of it's just like it's most of
It's everywhere.
it's most of the
It's
projects.
like every token, right?
Yeah, and there's like good ones too, right? I mean, there's
Yes.
like
Solana.
for example, I mean, arguable if it's good or not. Just on like a fundamental basis, but
Price performance. The,
performance
the
wise,
best fundamental metric.
yep, exactly. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's all I care about. So I'm like not much better. I buy this while thinking it's shit, like most of the time, and
Sure.
then sell it for higher prices. So it's pretty much the same that a VC does. It's just that they get in at like much cheaper and then dump on the
Hedge on
obvious.
perps immediately when they're up a zillion X.
And then
Yeah,
they
yeah,
tell
yeah.
people like how it's the future, and that is what pisses me off, because I mean, I can tell you if I'm buying something that's garbage, and I've done that like all the time.
Yes.
But sadly, you're not going to hear any VC, obviously, but still sadly, that something that they've been buying is shit, and that you probably shouldn't. They're trying to get it. They're trying to sell as high as they can for most of it
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. So I don't think this is going anywhere anytime soon as a feature of crypto market structure. The last one I've got is Circle discloses 55.7 billion worth of cash, treasury reserves. Just more Circle slash USDC transparency stuff, which I think is a net positive.
Mhm.
There was a lot of Circle, I guess, FUD
Oh, so
or
stupid.
doubt threads
So
flying
stupid.
around.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Out of all the stable coins you could pick, that wasn't particularly high on my list. But maybe this will reassure some people in general. And I think we're so spoilt for choice now when it comes to stable coins as to which ones you want and how easy it is to convert from one to the next that you can kind of tailor it to your own risk preference and profile. But it's always kind of classic bear market content of core pillars of the ecosystem blowing up and going to zero. So it wasn't totally surprising to read that. And I still welcome, even if I don't endorse the process, if you will, the outcome of getting this level of transparency is nice. Maybe USDT follows through. Who knows? People have been saying that for years. Um, Ultimately, I don't think it matters too much. And, as I said, for the most part, you've got a choice as to where to park your blockchain dollars, so to speak. And then for you, the whole tether depegging thing was an entry signal initially, as it was, right? Or
Yeah.
it's the kind of stuff that tends to happen when things break, you know. So it's worth keeping an eye on the kind of news feeds for it. But all in all, I think stablecoins are like the best thing that's come out of crypto, or it's definitely up there. And I think with every year, and especially with what we've had happen this year with lenders and contagion and macro, all that, the stable coins that survive that are probably in decent shape, you know?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, most of the FUD that I've been reading is just complete garbage. And I mean, at some point at the lows, we had people be like, FTX is probably insolvent and all that kind of stuff. Like whenever people go like completely crazy, because there's like some stuff that is very easy to believe, right? Celsius being like done for, like I mean that makes sense to me, right? They're like a company that just kind of did what every other company did as well, and a bunch of other companies kind of went belly up, so it makes sense. But if you start like kind of making shit up, especially with stuff like Tether, um, it's like, what the fuck are you doing, right? We've had so much Tether FUD since 2000, whatever. I mean, it's been more than 5 years now. Every month something comes up and people are like, okay, it's going to zero now, using it as a reason not to buy something. And I'm like, I mean, it doesn't really make much sense. Like for short term kind of prediction, it does make sense. If you think Tether's insolvent, just don't be in crypto. If you think that USDC is like doesn't have what they claim to have, you don't want to be in crypto. You don't want to be like, okay, price is gonna move down now because of that. Because usually this kind of stuff just doesn't blow up in like overnight, or like it's gonna blow up overnight, but like timing that is pretty much impossible. So if you think that's the case, just don't be in the market, I guess. But yeah, I've seen so much garbage floating around where I'm just like, okay, what the fuck are you guys thinking? Um,
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, this is what happens, right? Price goes down, stuff starts to break, people look for the next thing
yeah,
that's going to
and they
break.
go
And
bigger and bigger and bigger. And at some point,
yes.
they should be like, if you expect Binance to kind of go insolvent, I mean, what are you doing in this market, right?
Yeah, the prices of everything is going to be zero in that case,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
So
like
they're
there's
still holding like all their NFTs and ETH, and they're posting threads about like USDC and USDT going to zero. It's a very
it's
curious mental gymnastics feat, you know.
it's beyond like I don't even know how you can make that kind of that comment without just completely running for the hills.
Engagement, probably,
Yeah,
right? If I had
probably,
to
yeah.
guess, probably
Because
engagement.
because the thing is like nowadays there's actually like stuff in crypto, and I'm not saying I like that it is this way, but there's stuff in crypto that is too big to fail, right? I think Binance is too big to fail. If they fail, we have a big problem. FTX is pretty, I think it's at the same point really. It's too big to fail. And then I think Tether is the same way, but it's getting better with like more stable coins coming in. So like if you kind of
Terra and Luna.
uh, yeah, I
Sorry,
mean,
UST and Luna, I
I'm
should
actually,
say.
and this is why I commented on like when it happened. I was like, I'm glad it happened now and not like in a year,
Yeah,
because I think
yeah.
at that point it would have been too big to fail as well, and then it fails, and we're kind of like all screwed. Um, but yeah, if you
I
kind
mean,
of,
it kind of fucked us all anyway, you
yeah,
know.
they
Like
did.
it did a pretty decent dent as far as these things go.
Yeah, all coins went down 80% because of it. So yeah,
Yeah, three arrows went somewhere. No one actually knows.
Yeah.
The final bit, maybe we should have started with this. It doesn't really matter. CPI inflation came in at 9.1%, estimated beat expectations, which were 8.8%, and that was core, so not including a lot of energy stuff. That was the initial reaction to that was really bad, but their markets recovered and usual type of volatility, but it seems to have been resolved. I think the odds of 100 basis point hike, 1%, went up quite a lot,
Yes.
almost up to 100%, or like a near certainty, or at
Hmm.
least a very high likelihood for the next meeting. And the markets are rallying anyway. Again, we've done enough LARPing on macro stuff, and especially when the market's at such very clear technical levels, or at least technical levels that are going to generate trade signals, or like clear signals. Just trade the thing that you know, right? Or that you have some sort of edge or advantage in, or how you know what you know how to interpret, as opposed to doing more tea leaf reading. On this occasion, I think if I had to make Steelman the case for why the markets are bouncing despite inflation being higher, it would be some version of that this is basically peak inflation, peak tightening. The Fed is going to overcorrect and then going to have to reverse course sooner than expected in some capacity, right? And that will be positive or whatever else. It's
Hmm.
kind of just one of those classic very overbought or very oversold. It's almost like a mean reversion signal in itself, right? Because I remember a time a couple months ago, it was like a few months ago, where 50 basis points hike was the outlier view among the Fed panel members, right? The
Yes.
committee members. And now it's like 100 basis points as opposed to 50 basis points is like a near certainty or at least very high probability. So they're late. I mean, they're late, and for reputational and credibility purposes, they'll probably want to overcorrect and really beat down inflation. And I think the market is just looking at that as a potential type of peak tightening, peak inflation, and generally more predictable and easier conditions after that type of event. And the market, by virtue of being a future discounting mechanism or whatever else, it has to consider things down the line, not just what happens immediately, which is why I think the immediate reaction was like that. And also just volatility as a product of positioning into the event, and then some longer term bets being made afterwards. The whole soft landing thing we've described before as well. It's the idea that the Fed has to do the impossible task of raising interest rates enough and quickly enough to bring down inflation meaningfully, while at the same time not quote unquote cooling down the economy aggressively enough to cause a recession and trigger a recession, and that just seems like an impossible job. I don't think this changes much in the grand scheme of things as far as macro goes. The only assumption I have is probably going to take slightly longer than we have patience for to generate like a clear signal or clear resolution or whatever else. But I think at least for the next 1 or 2 weeks, crypto price action and S&P price action as well is going to give clearer signals, or at least the first meaningful tradable signals in a long time, rather than acting late on an inflation print that has already taken place. I don't know what you think about any of this, or if you care at this point.
Yeah, I do agree with that. But in general, like the thing is, like I do care. It's just for me, other factors are more important, which is hilarious to say if you're like any kind of intellectual and someone says to you, "Hey, I care more about this price line being hit than about about like inflation and whatever."
Yeah, line make Boeing beats the macro economy.
Yeah,
You heard it here first.
I mean that's just my view, and I mean it's stupid, I know, but it's been working for me, so I'm just gonna stick with it. And I think in general, the whole like something that I see a lot is people just jump on trends very late, and then because they jumped on late, they just get religious about it, and at some point, those trends change. It's like just how it works, and I'm basically making a bet that I could see that change, at least for the short term. Because even if there's like a strong trend, right? As with price, like it's the same everywhere, right? It's the same with price and it's the same with like popular trends. There's times where those trends get less popular and more popular, but people just want to go from 1 to 100 straight in a straight line instead of like from 1 to 50 to 25 to 75 to 50 to 100. And I think that's just kind of like not how it goes, right? It's not a straight line. It's just a little bit more complicated than that price wise.
Yeah, I mean, if this breakout sticks and the crypto starts to go up, if anything, and this is me just shilling your position
Oh
at
yeah,
that point,
please.
that could be a decent catalyst, like narratively for a disbelief rally that the economy is like unchanged and it continues to look like shit, but crypto kind of marches up, even if it's towards a paltry mean reversion. That still is a there's a setup there, you know.
Hmm.
They're like, hey, nothing's changed. Like Fed's last tighten and credits tightening as well, and debt is expensive and all this type of stuff. And then if crypto has its own price action and that continues to march up, that would certainly make a few people unsettled as far as these things go. And
Hmm.
that's the thing, right? I think we've reiterated before. Like price going to 30K, it's still bearish.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's bearish.
yeah.
Price going to whatever, or up to 32, 4, 6, 8K, it's still bearish. Yeah, you still have
Hmm.
to treat it like as a bear market rally. But essentially, price doubling doesn't change that the economy's shit and macro sucks and that the conditions are terrible.
Yeah.
It's almost just it would just slightly be an extended mean reversion. That's how low we've come. But
Hmm.
again, we all know we're not going to get there because at some point I'll buy this thing in the very near future, and that's it. It's all over.
Yeah.
If we want to circle back, what do you think of this ETH developing price action during the course of this show?
Uh,
Hourly, 4 hour.
it just looks amazing to me. It's been looking amazing to me like for a while now. ETH PTC just looked good because the thing is like ETH PTC basically broke the most important level and then didn't do shit afterwards. Um, and I mean we've seen that on the opposite side of things, right? Where it kind of like broke out above 0.084 and then immediately closed back inside that range. And then it went all the way to range low, right? And now we've done the same thing just on the opposite side of the range where we broke down and then didn't have any follow through. So it makes sense to me to be bullish that on ETH BTC side of things. And given that I'm like, okay, Bitcoin's at 20K, I mean, it just makes sense to be bullish ETH USD in that instance, right? Because if I think ETH BTC is going to go up, and if I think Bitcoin has a good chance to bounce, I mean, I'm going to be an ETH USD bull because I have like both pairs behind me. Either ETH BTC goes up and I'm going to make money, or Bitcoin USD goes up and I'm also going to make money. So yeah, I like it in general, and especially like on the low time frame. Obviously, can't hate on this. And as I'm saying
Sure.
that, I can see it like just break back down in the range and completely wreck me. But I'm pretty. I don't know. I've been very very chill about this position. I don't know why. I guess it's just high conviction. Because usually, like whenever you shield something like as hard as I've done, you kind of like, I don't want to deal with the shit if I'm wrong.
Sure.
In this
Yeah, yeah.
instance, because like the thing is like you're gonna lose money because you're wrong, right? You're in position, you're gonna lose money, it's gonna suck. But you're also gonna get so much hate on social media for having been wrong and having lost money, basically, that it's just not gonna be a fun experience. But in this instance, I'm just like I'm so high conviction that I think like whatever. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. This is like one of the better bets to make, so I don't mind chilling it. And everyone that gets annoyed by it, I mean, it's just like okay, if you get annoyed by it, it's just how it is. I don't really care.
Good for you. Some good personal character development there, Don. Proud of you. Awesome. I think we've covered plenty. Any final bits and pieces in the chat that you think we should address? Anything interesting come up while we've been blabbering?
Not really. No, chats have actually been like very quiet. Just been listening.
We just bored them out of their minds.
Maybe they just all fell asleep. But no, it's
We
been
appreciate your viewership anyway, even if you are asleep.
yeah. I mean, the chat's been basically 50% dating comments and then 50% just being nice. So
Wow, that something's wrong.
yeah,
Where's our usual audience?
yeah. I don't know.
Awesome. Okay, any final notes from you, Don? I guess congrats on the girlfriend. So if
Uh,
the channel goes to zero and the content's garbage and everything is late, you'll know who to blame.
uh,
Me, because I'm the lazy one.
yeah, thanks. I don't know. I don't think there's anything really. Like I said before on the last show, I could see myself and in general, like just like myself, like take off next month.
Yeah,
So that's like a thing. But that's gonna be discussed, I think, in the next 2 weeks.
sure.
So there's nothing really there. And yeah, I don't think there's too much to talk about.
Cool.
Just fucking send it for me, please.
Good.
I want to make some money. That'd be nice. Anything
You've got a
beyond that.
girlfriend habit to fund, man. You
Oh
need this to
shit,
go
yeah.
up.
I mean, she's a model, so it's like you're gonna have to. have deep pockets,
Yeah,
I
yeah, we
guess.
know she has an Instagram account, okay? Like,
Oh,
you got to
please
tell us
don't.
something interesting.
Oh, I don't. I'm not gonna. If
Yeah, good for you,
uh,
don't. I
yeah,
think the less you speak on this topic,
the
the better your
better. Yeah,
life will be. Yeah, totally agree.
I'm very, very scared of like what people are gonna do. So I'm just not sharing anything. I think beyond this point.
I'll just send her your previous dating streams. I'm sure she'll
Oh
appreciate
shit.
them.
Shit.
Yeah, no worries on that one. On my front, if Don takes August off, I'll probably still do Monday markets, and I'm planning to. To be honest, I've mostly finished a very short document on leverage trading. Basically, a guide on how not to get liquidated. It's the type of thing because Don and I started writing quite some time ago. Oh, can I open this or is it going to show all my weird tentacle porn? Fuck it, we gamble live. Futures article. Okay, there we go. No, it's fine. It's fine. This is safe. So Don and I started started working on this a long time ago. You can see January 2021. Wow, we're old. Anyway, we wanted to do this cryptocurrency futures trading and accessible guide, just like a very detailed thing with intro, types of futures, order types, leverage, liquidation, funding, open interest, cost of trading, hedging, all that type of stuff. And we got about 12 pages deep, and then we just got fucking bored, right? Not only did we get fucking bored, we were sort of like, who's going to read this thing? Like, ultimately, the people who need to know, like, the smart people already know this stuff, and the dumb people aren't going to read it. So who's left? Who's the readership here? So we kind of left it in the dust, but then decided to revive the concept by making a much shorter, much more beginner-friendly, like accessible guide to this thing on basically how not to get liquidated. And with a focus on the liquidation side of things. So different types of collateral, what does leverage mean, high leverage versus low leverage, cross margin, isolated margin, like all of those types of things, just so you have like a go-to document to remind yourself and refresh yourself, or even just learn it for the first time if you kind of always knew that you didn't know what you were doing but got away with it so far. And it's also one of those things that you can send to your friends if they just signed up to some exchange to trade with leverage and you don't want them to blow up immediately. You send them that and you feel good about yourself that you've done your duty as a friend in informing them of the risks. So kind of working on that. It's actually mostly done. I just sat down and wrote most of it today. So that'll probably come out end of August or in September after the break month, most likely. Monday markets are still going to be going on with me, and I'm also going to try to release another video for the Cred channel, either on pattern failure or something like that. So maybe some more educational bits and pieces coming from my side. But overall, yeah, just, boiling out here, family time, all that good stuff, and nothing else. We'll keep our lovely audience updated, as always. That's it from us. Thank you for spending your Friday evening with us. I hope your life progresses in such a way that you don't have to, but while you are where you are, we appreciate your company. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. As always, it really helps us a lot. And do check out our sponsors, the link in the description below. That is the FTX app. Track your portfolio, hide your portfolio, buy stuff, sell stuff, show your family what a good little investor you are. I'm sure they'll very much appreciate it. They'll very much appreciate it. English is very difficult. Cool. Don, thank you. Congrats on the girlfriend. Audience, thank you. FTX, thank you for giving Don money for the girlfriend. Hopefully the market adds some to that tab as well. We'll find out pretty soon, like tonight, if he's going to be okay or not. That's all from us. Take care. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on Monday.
Bye bye.